Thanks everybody for coming. Welcome to this year's County's Spending Affordability Advisory Committee. My name is Holly Sung. I'm this year's chair of the county's budget administrator. Before I start, I want to invite a special guest to do a little history. Dr. Bob, you want to come up?
Everyone hear me? So good morning and thank you so much for coming out. I'm not going to stay long, but I just wanted to personally thank you. You may notice something around the room that almost all the chairs are full. And not only am I asking you to do something really important as it relates to the spending and the priorities, because as you know, a lot of people want a lot of things. And as county executive, I'd love to give everybody everything immediately. But we have certain things that are going to restrain us, like how much we can spend. And the work that you're doing is so invaluable. And I'm especially asking you to do a difficult thing because there's a lot of you here, and I wanted so many voices to be represented. I wanted to make sure that as you're looking at how much we should be spending moving forward for this upcoming year, some of our challenges and some of our opportunities, that everyone had a voice. And so you all represent important voices, not only for our community, but for our future. And so I just wanted to personally come by and thank you for your hard work. You could be doing so many things on a 7:30 post-snow day, but you're here helping us chart the future for our county and helping us with setting some of our priorities. So I just wanted to thank you so much, and I especially wanted to thank Holly, Dr. Sun, for her willingness to chair this. It's a tough job. It's a tough job to wrangle all of the disparate interests and voices into one voice to help advise me and the council and our community. And so Godspeed, do great work. I'm very confident in all the wonderful things that you'll do and the great product that you'll have. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so before I start, I'm very happy to see some old friends, but also new welcome new friends to the committee there. Let's just go around the table a little bit. My name is Holly Sung. As I said, I'm the county administrator, budget administrator. I have been working for the county for almost 4 years. It's a tremendously productive job. I really enjoy my time here working with people both in the county government and also outside the government. In the past few years, myself personally learned so much in this committee. So hopefully you enjoy the experience as well. So I'll stop from here.
Good morning. My name is Lisa Wessel. I am a realtor with RE/MAX 100. I've been selling residential real estate in Howard County for the past 15 years. So I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Janet Irvin. I'm the finance director here for Howard County, closing in on 1 year. It's been great fun. I've learned a lot working with some really great people after almost 30 years of government finance. I think we do a good job here.
Barbara Lawson, community organizer, helper, and I've been on this committee now for 4 years, so this is my 5th year. So.
Caitlin Connors, I'm an internal auditor in the Department of County Administration, and I've been with the county for a little over 3 years.
Good morning, everybody. I'm George Davis. I live in Marysville, and I am the CEO of Maryland Technology Development Corp., which is located on Columbia Gateway Drive.
Good morning, Larry Tweel, CEO, Howard County Economic Development Authority.
I'm Shiesta. I'm currently pursuing my master's in accounting.
Hi, Jennifer Jones, Deputy Chief of Staff, and this is my 2nd month.
I'm Dorais Rouhani. I'm the Vice President for Strategic Partnerships and Applied Research, and as well as the Chief Economist for the Regional Economics Institute at Towson University. And I'm a Howard County resident, so I'm grateful to be on this committee.
Good morning, Leonardo McCarthy, President of the Howard County Chamber of Commerce on Elkridge resident, and this is my 5th spending for good.
I'm Lynn Coleman. I'm the Vice President of Administration and Finance at Howard Community College.
Beverly White Seals, President and CEO of the Community Foundation of Howard County, and 20 years on the Rouse Company payroll.
Brian F. Person, CEO of E-Way Relief Services.
Keith Olinger, I'm a farmer in western Howard County.
Christina Donald Small, Board of Education. This is my second year on the committee.
My name is Lonnie Robbins. Good morning, and I'm the county's Chief Administrative Officer.
Craig Denning, I'm the county auditor, being here for 6 years, and primary job is to keep an eye on this guy right here.
So we're sitting together.
Good morning, I'm Brooke Mamba. I'm with the Budget Office, and I've been with the office for 7 years. I think I've been here the longest from anyone, so very excited to be here.
Good morning, I'm Roger Barnes, President of Blue Ridge Enterprises, a local development consulting firm, and also a long-time worker with the Rouse Company back in the day.
Rafael Hila, CFO for Howard County Public School System.
Good morning, I'm Nikki Highsmith-Burnick, and I'm President and CEO of the Horizon Foundation, your community health foundation.
Good morning, I'm Elizabeth Crum, and I'm the Vice President of Population Health and Advancement for Howard County General Hospital.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Swigert-Mello, and one of the newly elected Howard County Board of Education members.
Hi, I'm Khalida Hassan, and I'm a mom of two, and very excited to be a part of this. I'm a community activist from North Laurel. Great to have a voice here.
Good morning, Tonya Cannon, President and CEO of Howard County Library System. I've been here about 9 months.
Steve Poinot, Ellicott City resident, Executive Vice President with Howard Bank, and this is my 8th year on the committee.
Good morning, Milton Matthews. I'm the President and CEO of the Columbia Association. I've been on the committee, I think this is about my 5th time.
Richard Clinch, I'm the Director of the Jacob France Institute at the University of Baltimore, county resident, live in Clarksville, been on the committee 7 to 9 years, not really sure. I also consult and do a forecast for the committee.
I'm Josh Lagar. This is my 4th year on the committee. Maple Lawn resident and currently attorney at Oracle.
Good morning, I'm Javita Hernandez. I represent strategic alliances and external affairs for the U.S. Department of Commerce's Minority Business Development Agency. I also am a professor at Coppin State University, and I have 2 small firms in the county.
Thank you all very much. Can my staff also introduce themselves?
I'm going to start. Okay, I'll start. Raul Cruz with the Budget Office. I'll be your other contact for spending affordability, so you'll see my emails throughout this time. So.
I'm Jeff Brown. I'm Chief of the Research Division in the Department of Planning and Zoning.
Phil Gallegos, Howard County Budget Office.
Norm Snowbrick. I'm an analyst with the Howard County Budget Office.
Jimmy Block, Budget Office.
And Nikki for Finance. Thank you. By the way, I want to thank my staff for getting up very early. Always set up everything out there. Thank you so much. It's so nice to see such a talented and very diversified group. I really look forward to work closely with you in the next probably 6 weeks also. This is a very important time of the year, and we are starting developing ideas about next year's budget. So we try to get everybody's help to examine different factors that drive both revenue and expenditure side there. So we're going to ask different departments and other experts to come here, share with you their perspective and their understanding about both the challenge and also things that potentially can drive the both expenditure and revenue side there. So you will have opportunity to digest and question different information, and hopefully as a group collectively bring some important recommendations together. So with that, I will start with today's agenda. Today is actually relatively light, believe it or not. We also just talk about the function of the committee and also some general update about the county's fiscal economic condition. And Janet Urban, our finance director, is going to share with you a little bit about the county's credit rating and the debt situation. So I will start with the PowerPoint. So that's just today's calendar agenda. Right. So first about the committee. The committee is called by county executive through executive order, and we've appointed a group of citizens there. And we always have very diversified group there with different expertise. And one thing I want to emphasize is the committee is really tasked to provide independent, nonpartisan, data-driven analysis, and basically want to have common sense kind of discussion and put aside political views there and try to, in practice, try to find the best possible way in terms of serving the citizens there. And the committee is expected to provide a report to county executive by March 1st with multiple recommendations, but in particular related to projected revenues for the next fiscal year and projected multi-year revenues and expenditures. What is the level of debt authorization that should be adequate for the coming fiscal year, as well as various policy recommendations deemed appropriate that impact the county's fiscal picture. So typically, as I mentioned earlier, we meet about between 5 to 7 times in total in the next several weeks there. And traditionally, we hold that in early mornings because that most people have full-time job. Understanding some members might have difficulty doing that in the future, we will be more than happy to work with folks there and do a survey sometime during the year. But at this point, because most meetings are already settled, we have limited flexibility. So thank you for your understanding. And for those that missed the meetings, number one, you can watch the video that's going to be posted online for all the meetings there. And we also going to provide you materials through Dropbox. And I'll be more than happy to debrief you if needed. So if you contact me separately, I'll try to make that arrangement. In terms of recommendations in the report, it's not going to be 100% the consensus, but we're going to base it on majority vote. So all the key recommendations, usually between mid to late February, we're going to go over them together. So we'll do a formal voting to make sure we reflect the majority vote in those recommendations in the report. In terms of meeting schedule, as you can see there, we list 8 blocked times, but 2 of them are just backup dates in case we needed that or if we have a severe weather condition. And in the starting from next week, we're going to have different government entities come here and to talk more about their own business and also their forecasting. For example, next week it's going to be our education entities, friends in community college, library, and the school system to talk about their own projection in terms of their service, their challenges there, and their needs. And also public safety, both next time and also the following week are going to talk about their business as well as their crime rates and other things. And following that, we'll talk about infrastructure needs of the county. And then after that, Jeff, who is here today, our research director of DPZ, is going to talk about the county's demographic changes there, population change throughout the year, as well as development trend, and also our EDA, the director is going to be here to talk about economic development policies and also the trend that I'm seeing in the county. And the Health Human Services Agency are going to share about their concern as well as their service challenges there in the county. And after that, at this point scheduled at February 12th, that's going to be the key projections about the county's revenue, about the economy, which is Dr. Clinch typically will do a presentation about economic outlook as well as personal income projection. And then we're going to talk about multi-year projections as well as finance is going to talk about the debt projections here. And we are going to start frame and discuss recommendations for the report. And the following week, February 19th, we will planning to continue that discussion and try to flag and reach consensus about what are the key points to make. And also the actual fiscal study, at that point, we anticipate some preliminary results should be available. So we will invite our consultant to be here to share the findings with the committee. And after that, we will just call a few folks from the committee help us craft the first draft and circulate around the committee. After that, we may or may not meet again and mostly use email to collect feedbacks, and then we will craft the report and finalize the report. And that doesn't stop there. Once the report is finalized there, we're going to communicate that with the county executive. But also after that, usually we are invited by the county council to do briefing as well. Again, I might seek for help from this committee for some members help me do that presentation together. And also, depending on which organization are interested, we also reach out to the communities, different groups there, to make sure we help them understand the committee's positions on different issues, because it's so important to help shape the county's entire fiscal picture.
Just before we start that, I want to talk a little bit about last year's committee report. And the report was both available online and also you can find it in the Dropbox. By the way, if anybody who have technical issues access the reports, feel free to contact Raul directly there and we'll make sure everybody have access to Dropbox. That's going to be our place to locate current and future meeting materials. I want to make sure everybody have access to that. In that place, we already put last year's report for your reference. I just want to have a quick summary about what was talking about last year. In terms of key projections, last year the committee made a recommendation of revenue growth of 1.75%, which is about 19 million higher than prior year. So it's basically a growth of 1.75%. Interesting that actually the percentage is slightly lower than our budget office projection. Partly of the reason is that at that point there's a lot of uncertainties regarding what General Assembly is going to do regarding the potential impact of federal tax law change on that. So the committee think it was prudent not to account for that, and also understanding the general economic picture have a lot of uncertainties there. So that's why they bring down the number a little bit. And it turns out, finally, the General Assembly decided not to touch much about local government's net benefit from the federal tax law change. So our final budget actually incorporates $8 million based on that. So that has happened after the committee already finished their job. So at that point, they wouldn't be able to know that. But nevertheless, the general conservative approach, you will find it out very wise because there are some fiscal condition after that. Economic outlook has been turning even less positive. Second thing is about the GO bond authorization. Just FYI, the county has both operating budget and the capital budget. Operating budget is, the general fund is about $1 billion. That's used to support our daily operation. Those are the personnel and operating costs there. That's to pay all the service we're providing on a daily basis, but also include debt service payment. The capital budget is talking about infrastructure. Those are the schools, bridges, roads, police stations, parks, recreations, all those. And those projects are primarily funded through bond. In our case, it's primarily through general obligation bonds there. And we issue 20-year bond and then pay principal and interest in the following 20 years on that. So every year we have to go to the budget and ask for bond authorization there. And the debt services get paid through the annual operating budget. So last year the committee recommended bond authorization of $75 million, which is actually lower than what has been recommended and implemented before. And part of the reason is that historically, there were one period of time we actually authorized quite a significant amount of GO bond. Throughout the years, it's actually eating a lot of capacity left for the county. So now the county's major debt indicators already starting shooting up. Actually, it's expected to meet and exceed the county's debt policy in terms of how much debt we should be allowed in terms of adequate level, affordable level. So in concern of that, the committee said we should actually bring down our debt authorization. In terms of fiscal prudence there, we actually end up, the county still authorized about 97 million GO bond, partly because the administration wanted to provide a one-time assistance to our school system. And in fiscal year 2019, the state aid to the school projects was only $8 million versus traditionally $26 million there. So in order to try to keep the school system having enough support to maintain their needed capital budget, the government at that point made a one-time decision to boost our GO bond to the school system significantly for 1 year. So that's part of the reason after we end up actually having more than original committee recommended authorization for GO bond. The third bullet talk about multi-year projection. At that point, the committee actually said we really should take a conservative approach for multi-year projections for planning purpose. Even preliminary projection was showing about 3.4, 3.5% a year for long-term average growth there. And I think the committee was very wise because this year, when it's time for us to come back to you, maybe a few weeks from now, I would anticipate our multi-year projection will be lower than what was shown last year, given the recession talks, the general economic cool down, and also there are some other factors that's going to impact the county's long-term fiscal picture. In terms of policy recommendations, there are several important points discussed and also included in final report last year. The first one was talking about conduct a comprehensive study on the long-term fiscal impact of adequate public facility ordinance, or sometimes we call it AFO. Just for the benefit of our audience, there AFO is an ordinance trying to make sure the new economic development will still be able to ensure adequate level of public facilities, in particular school capacity is not exceeding certain level. It doesn't push the student enrollment above certain level. Otherwise, the new economic development has to stop or have the moratorium period. So the approved AFO last year, based on the calculation, it looks like it's going to stop probably 75 to 80% of the new development during the moratorium period that started fiscal year 2022. So based on that, there was a quick study done last year to try to have an understanding about fiscal impact, but it was really done in a rush, so it didn't allow a comprehensive determination about what does that mean for both revenue and expenditure, and actually the impact could be very significant. So the committee recommended county actually did have a consultant come in and do a comprehensive study. And we followed that advice. Actually, we did competitive bidding and already selected a consultant. They're on board and at this moment very busily working together with all the different departments, try to do a fiscal study. And it is anticipated by sometime like mid-February, there will be some preliminary results that can share with the committee. And we do think that's going to have a lot of implications on both revenue and expenditures for the county. And that's a very important point made by the committee and the government followed. In terms of revenue options, obviously when we have fiscal challenge, we look at the both revenue and expenditure side. Last year the committee talked about several possibilities and encouraged the government to explore. One of the options was mentioned, it was raising transfer tax by 25 basis points to help support a capital project needs. And the reason is at that point, the committee recognized the significant challenge for different capital needs on that. And at that point, and even now, the transfer tax of the county are still below some of the neighboring jurisdictions there. So at that point, the committee believed there's an opportunity to raise by some, and which could generate some needed resources to support the capital project there. The committee also asked the state to shift the rate setting authority to the local government, so the local government can control that rather than the state determining both the rate and also the allocation of the funding. Another point was the ambulance fee. It was rightfully pointed out that the county is the only one at this point around Maryland counties that do not charge the ambulance or EMS transportation fee. All other counties already charge on that. It's kind of a user fee, and in practice, basically covered by the insurance company. And it was also argued that the insurance premium in this region already factored in that factor when they set up the rate. So theoretically speaking, that shouldn't have too much impact directly on individual users. So following on that, again, we talked with some consultant to do study, and we are working with our public safety agencies there. So sometime during the course, you will hear some presentation from our fire department and share with you our current status on exploring that option and whether there's a plan to continue on that course. And also the committee last time talked about we need to recover some overtime spent for different special events. So a special event fee, following that advice, we actually implement a special event fee, try to recover the overtime cost from police department, fire department there. So that's already in place. Again, I think police department can give you an update when you get a chance to talk with them. In terms of expenditure control, one thing that was mentioned last year and the year before is about for the school system there. We understand there are tremendous needs there, but in reality, it's not likely to provide the needed or requested resources there. So it was encouraged by the committee that the school system will take ownership about some of the issues there and also do best to prioritize and also look into internal innovative solutions for process and efficiency gains there. And it was also encouraged that the school system develop some multi-year plan to address its own health spend refund issue. And on top of that, it was also discovered, it's also discussed that the county government should continue the multi-year planning approach to help address its long-term liability. That's not only the debt obligation, but also pension and the health benefit fund, especially for the retiree health benefit there. And we should continue to explore technology to help with the efficiency gain.
Holly?
Yeah.
Question? Can
Yeah.
I ask a question? On the last slide, just to be clear, on the revenue options, as I understand, the transfer tax was not increased, correct? It was a recommendation, but was it executed?
It was not executed. It was the government was exploring that option, but nothing has been implemented yet.
Okay. And then the ambulance EMS fee is under review. That will come back to the committee.
Correct.
And the public safety overtime was implemented.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Well, Holly, can I just clarify one thing?
Yes.
Does that include Meriwether overtime?
Oh, yes. Thank you for bringing that up. The fee implemented for the special event recovery, the current legislation actually excluded Meriwether in the existing fee. So that part was not. That's not covered. Can come over.
All right. Thanks.
Right. So now I'll switch to the future. That's the history. So I'll begin with a little bit about the national economic outlook. We have actually a couple of economists here there, so feel free to jump in if you feel like the picture doesn't meet what you were feeling. But what I know is not that different from everybody already read from newspaper and news media on a daily basis there. In terms of national economy, the general idea is there's still several indicators very solid, like the employment. We have, very low unemployment rate, especially in the county, but also nationwide. And also there are some other indicators are positive continuously. But throughout the time, we have seen more and more risk factors, or the risk has been rising. For example, the housing market, both existing and new home sales nationwide, has recently seen pretty sharp drop there, and even locally, I think things are start to show signs of cooling down for our housing market. Stocks market, obvious, everybody have been hearing about the volatile performance there, and factory activity has been impacted recently, and obviously there's often a lot of concerns about the trade war as well as global economic slowdown there. And with interest rates raised a few times, and looks like sometime during this year, we don't know exactly, might be get raised again. It's going to make it more expensive for borrowing for business, especially probably for small business. That's going to have some impact there. And because of our closeness to the federal government, a lot of the policies there, as well as the practice there, such as freeze and shutdown, is going to actually have more than other places impact on our region. And for example, the recent shutdown that's going to impact not only some county residents that's directly employed by federal government, but also those having contractors, providing contract services for the federal government. So those factors have to have some impact as well. The second thing is about the recession. About a year ago, there were not too many very serious discussions about recession, risk, at least not imminent. But in the past several months, that risk has been more and more, and we have been hearing the odds have been increasing. Again, some of the indicators, like the Treasury yield curve, that hasn't reversed yet due to to see a definite shift to recession, but it has been flattening, and there are some other indicators showing that things are cooling down. So depending on which service you're looking at, of economists or business CEOs there, the odds could be different, spread across the board. But at this point, the Wall Street Journal Economist Survey was putting at 25% probability for recession within next 12 months. And some other surveys was bumping up that to about 50%. And in terms of by end of next year, the odds are even higher. Some of them actually, I think more than 50% will likely to, the nation will likely have a recession by end of next year. And there are others believe it's actually going to be the following year. I don't think anybody's really knowing for sure when recession is going to hit, but I think the odds are increasing. At least in the next 3 years, there's a large chance for the nation to experience some form of recession. And for us, that means our revenue might get stressed, and also there might be more demands for service for those in need. Okay, so actually, our state department and also other municipalities or local governments, their own outlook already to some extent reflected that conservative approach or their general sense about the not very promising fiscal picture. The state government recently, in December, lowered their FY19 revenue forecast by $18 million and also lowered their FY20 revenue projections by $55 million, and also the state controller announced that we must plan for the inevitable economic downturn in foreseeable future. So that is basically the sentiment we have been felt in some other places as well. By the way, the state also was estimating the job growth averaging about only 0.6% per year in the next 3 years. And that number, what I need to say is that in the counties, we actually already see the job growth softening. In terms of county residents employment, I look at the recent data in 2018 compared to the prior year, the actual growth is only 0.6%, so that's kind of very soft. Part of the reason is the county has very tight labor market there. Our unemployment rate is incredibly low. It's, I think last time I saw it's 2.7%. So you really don't have too much room for further growth of jobs there in such a market on that. And plus federal government and other action does has impact as well. And also, you might also heard from the news that Montgomery County recently already announced a mid-year reduction of $44 million to cope with a anticipated revenue shortfall. And we recently also got a report from National League of Cities, and that organization conducted a survey of about 1,000 cities in the nation, which shows that in general fund revenues are not keeping up with expenditures, with a general gap of about 2 percentage points. And also their estimate of revenue growth is only 0.4% per year. I would say the county so far has been doing better than national average, but just to give you a general picture, people are struggling in general for local government at this point regarding how to balance revenues with expenditure needs. Talking about the county, we just closed the fiscal year 2018, and the county's total general fund revenue growth was about $14 million. It's about 1.3%. So it's above national average, but nothing to celebrate about. And the prior year, the actual revenue growth was $19 million, which is about 1.8%. So at this point, if we just look at the general fund baseline revenue growth, before consider other factors there, I would say we still have very solid but moderate growth as a growing trend. In a typical year, it's probably 2 to 3% you can count on without any other factors kicking in. But the baseline growth is only part of the story. There are 2 other elements we have to keep an eye on for the next several years. The first one is the actual legislative impact. We just mentioned that last year the committee was recommending us to do a study for that. And last year, there was a quick consultant study done, was actually showing that foregone revenue could be very significant for general fund. The annual revenue foregone was estimated to be about $15–16 million. And for capital budget, the foregone revenue was estimated at $18–19 million per year for all those taxes like transfer tax, school surcharge, etc., tied to the new development. So those are very significant. Again, we are asking the new consultant hired to do a comprehensive study to understand those revenue expenditure impact. But these numbers could be adjusted, but I believe will end up still be very significant in terms of the impact on revenue side. So that's an element we have to build in terms of framing long-term projections. The other thing is the recession risk there. Again, we don't know for sure when that's going to kick in and to what extent, but if history tells anything, then in the last 2 rounds of economic downturns, the county general fund revenue lost an average of $40 million per year based on 2020 dollars. So the county's general fund is about $1 billion there, and in terms of the revenue source, it's primarily from 2. It's county's real and personal property taxes and also personal income taxes there. Those 2 combined actually constitute about 90% of our overall resources there. So it's basically taxpayers like you and me and also all the residents and business in the county. They're the ones who contribute to the county's revenues there. We have very small amount coming from the federal or state government there. Well, the ones who come from the state government throughout the years during their own economic recession is already cut down to a minimum. In terms of county revenue growth, as in earlier, it has shown a slowdown in the past several years there. Currently, or recently, it has been staying slightly under 2%. And these 2 graphs here are showing the trend of property tax base and personal income tax base in the county in terms of assessment growth or the tax income growth there. So the one on the top was showing assessable base change of the county essentially in the past 2 decades. You could see the first decade versus second decade are in a pretty clear contrast. The first decade, that's between 2000 and 2010. In general, the county was experiencing pretty good assessable base growth there, and that's because the county continued to develop very quickly. We have a new development coming in, plus also the housing market at that point was very good. But after that, we followed with economic downturn, and in the past several years, even during the recovery, it's really small recovery or moderate recovery. At this point, we still look at between 2 to 3% a year for assessable base growth. The second graph is talk about income tax revenue changes there. Again, this one is very volatile, but the first decade you see that in general we have been seeing relatively strong income tax growth in general. Again, at that point, population growth was faster. We have been seeing more wage growth at that point, and in the more recent history, we actually see pretty moderate growth in both income owners as well as the actual wage growth there. So the past 3 years, you could see that we actually experienced between 0.5% to slightly 2% growth for our income tax. Assessable base, that's the drivers for the county's property tax. Our most recent projections released by the State Department of Assessment and Taxation was showing only 2.4% for the county's property assessable base. Every year, each county actually in Maryland get 1/3 of the property get reassessed compared to 3 years ago, and the growth of a reassessment get phased in the following 3 years. So in any given year, the county's total assessable base really based on the phasing amount combined in these 3 areas there. The most recent group, which is group 1, represented by the red color area, the annual growth is anticipated to be 2.8%, so which is really not bad. It's actually showing a little bit of recovery. But if you combine with all 3 groups, then the total assessable base is only about 2.4%. I mean, these days, 2.4%, if you go to other parts of the country, they were like, oh, that's very good. But for us, this is moderate, and if you look at the expenditure side, that's kind of far from what's enough to support all the needed expenditure growth or service needs there. By the way, the county's real property tax rates, if you combine the property tax for the general county and also the fire tax, it's already the second highest in Maryland counties there, so we have to evaluate the tax burden of our citizens there. Personal income tax, I think I already mentioned a little bit earlier that FY19 budget already factoring $8 million, essentially one-time bump in our revenue because of the result of the new federal tax law, and also accounted for some of the activities of taxpayers for tax planning purpose there. Currently, by the way, income tax rate is also the highest allowed by the state. We're at 3.2%. Talking about recession, again, it's just a possibility. What is going to make next recession different for the county government compared to the past? Are at least 2 points that I think. The first is that if you look at the timing, in the past 2 decades, the economic downturn didn't hit property tax and income tax at the same time. So in other words, sometimes one was performing not well, was experiencing negative growth, but the other one was actually happened to be good. So when income tax was not doing good, assessable base continued to have growth, so we were able to hedge a little bit, but next time it may or may not be the case anymore. The second thing is there's so-called homestead tax credit in Maryland for all the counties there. The homestead tax credit plays as a buffer during housing crash, market crash there. What it happens is that for owner-occupied property, your annual tax-based growth is capped by 5% regardless what the market does. So if your house appreciates, say, 20% a year during the housing bubble there, your tax payment only increased by 5%. So when the housing market kind of slumps there, because your actual tax payment are so much lower than market, your tax payment doesn't drop significantly. In fact, you might still grow because you are still so far away from the original market level. So what happens is, well, number one, it protects taxpayers to experience that volatility, but also for county government or local government there, even in the economic bubble there, you don't see the property tax drop significantly. In fact, in some years, you were still able to manage some growth in those periods because of the tax credit there. However, throughout the time, the market assessment and the taxable assessment are getting closer and closer. So that credit historically was peaked at $102 million in 2011. As of now, it's only $1 million. So in other words, if the housing market again, if it dropped 20%, and then our property tax is going to drop 20%, you don't have any buffer anymore. So that's actually a very significant issue going forward because we no longer have any cushion anymore. All right, so switch to expenditure side. As mentioned earlier, the county's general fund is a little more than $1 billion there. How do we spend that? Obvious, as ever expected, education is number one, so they actually take about 64% or roughly 2/3 of all the revenues or the budget of the general fund there. So that's represented by the naval colored bar. And the second priority is the public safety, that's represented by orange bar. And then there was other ones, that's public facilities, community service, and for the rest of the county government. So the county government, Howard County currently ranked 3rd among all the counties in terms per pupil county spending. So as of last time, the data was updated, the per pupil spending of county funding was $10,321. We are just like $270 lower than Montgomery County, which is number 2. and the per pupil spending is 51% higher than the state average. Again, I think, you know, education has been and will remain the county's #1 priority, and currently we did actually contribute as much as possible within our fiscal constraint there.
Can you go what year this data is from?
It is 1 year old, and actually, I think probably in the next several weeks, we will see another data report coming from the state government.
Holly.
Yeah.
Can you speak, I guess, a little bit in terms of just, I guess, how the county, I guess, counts its dollars, particularly as it relates to education? Because I know I've been in other meetings, I guess, that involve the school system, and the number that you might get there might be, say, 51, 55%. You don't know?
Mm-hmm.
And so...
Yeah, I guess we could, thank you for bringing that up. So there's a couple of things. First, the 64%, that's for all education entities, so that's our school system, community college, and library. If we only talk about the spending for expenditure related to the school system, then that's 58%. And that 58%, I went back to last 10 years, it pretty much has been stable throughout the period. Sometimes a little bit higher or low, but it's in general have been very stable as 58% for the overall spending in the school. But that spending including two pieces. One is direct appropriation, that's our funding goes to the school system, and you can see it in the news you were seeing the county appropriate how much money to the school system. So that's the majority. I believe it's close to 53% at this point. And that number has also been pretty stable as a share of the total. But on top of that, the county every year will spend that service payment for the capital project for all the school facilities, the capital new schools, renovation of schools. Those are that service directly related to that. Plus, the county also contribute to the school's retiree health benefit, and that grows every year as well. So if we include all of that, that's 58%. If we only include the direct appropriation to the school system, that's 53%. So I'm glad you brought that up, because sometimes there was a confusion about what are we talking about in terms of numbers there. So a few long-term drivers. The population growth of the county has been changed dramatically. Some of the revenue picture you saw earlier is reflection of both economic condition, but also the demographic and other changes in the county there. Because later Jeff is in our DBZ is going to talk to you, I think it's February 5th, about the economic demographic trend on that. But for some decades there, the county experienced significant demographic increase there in terms of population growth and also economic growth, development growth there. So in those periods of time, you see significant growth of population and service and revenues there. But now the county is maturing. Everything has been slowing down for a while, and that has a lot of implications on both revenue and the services there. In terms of population growth, in the past 7-8 years also, the student enrollment, you probably already heard that, average about 1.6%, but more recent couple of years is about 2%. We all know that's obviously key drivers or the pressure on the school side to keep and maintain and provide the services there. What people may or may not know is county's total population in this period of time actually has been experiencing comparable speed of growth. The total population growth has been average 1.7% also since 2011, and more recently close to 1.9%. So I just want to point it out that obvious school education is extremely important, but also the population sometimes have high demands for other services as well, no matter it's public safety or snow removal or parks, recs services there, and health and human services there that actually also continues to be in demand. And one thing to point out is 65+ group. The county is aging and aging very fast. At this point, that group is growing 7 to 8% a year, and expected to double between 2010 and 2030. And by in next 10 years expected to exceed actually school age group there. The group is represented by the orange color, the bar, by the way. So that actually constitutes a lot of challenges there to our own agencies there, and also a lot of nonprofit group here there. And between now and the next several years, I think we have to craft a strategy, try to make sure we cope up with the needs there. Another indicator is, or challenge for the expenditure side is the debt service payment. As the county build more and maintain more capital projects there, for different services there, our debt service burden keeps growing. At this point, our debt service annual growth is anywhere between $10 to $13 million. Our preliminary projection for next year appears to be a growth of $11 to $12 million. We just heard last year's total general fund growth is only $14 million there. So, I mean, debt service is going to be and continue to be a big part of our overall revenue growth. Have to designate to that. It's our obligation. Once we issue bond to support our capital project, we have to pay the debt and pay the debt for the next 20 years. And also the retiree health benefit costs continue to escalating. So as a result, the resource left to support the rest of the services there is going to be limited. Future revenue growth is going to be limited by multiple factors there. Some we already talked about, demographic change, and as you know, for aging population, the retirees, you have fixed income there, so the revenue growth is probably not as much compared to those who in active employment. And also the county, in terms of long-term run, it started to get built out. So in the next 20 years also that we actually are going to start to see we have hardly any space left for new development. So that's going to be an important limiting factor in terms of how much more we can develop, both residential, commercial, and that is going to obviously limit not today, but also the future, how much revenue growth room we might have. One thing we haven't got a chance to touch upon is the housing changes there. Our realtors association folks probably know better than me, but the housing definitely mix has been changed dramatically from 2 decades ago, let's say. It used to be really dominantly single-family house there. Today it's actually majority are multi-family houses there. Reflect a lot of things, including the young folks just graduated from the college. They may not be interested in big houses there or afford one. They're like more urban life there, so that's part of the reason, but also aging the population, retiree, they are downsizing the house as well. So there are different factors driving that trend, but as a result, that has implications on accessible base value, the income level, as well as the demand for services as well. So we don't have the official FY20 revenue projection yet. That's to be developed and shared with you by mid-February, but we can still talk about big picture based on what we discussed so far. Based on the baseline growth in the next 6 years, plus the factor of the Apple impact there, we are anticipating in the next 6 years a gap of between $25 to $30 million each year in our general fund. Will provide the same service of level of service there, meaning that not enhanced service, not adding any new initiative, just keeping farm level service there, the cost and versus the revenue likely have. So that's actually a pretty significant gap to close. And if we have, a second bullet, I was wrong. Second bullet supposed general fund with recession. If we add recession to the mix, obviously this scenario is going to get much worse if we count on another $40 million impact there. Another thing to mention is our fire fund. We have a fire fund is almost entirely supported by 17.6 cents of fire tax. That one has been in problem. Fire fund tax was set up in last time was set was 2013, and at that point the tax was designed to last only through a couple of years and then we're supposed to revisit the tax rate there. But because of management, the fund was able to last much longer than that. But with new stations opening and more stations, at this point, actually, we already have a structure in balance between our expenditure. And pretty soon, we're going to see a deficit and probably a sizable one. So that's one thing we have to come back to talk about ambulance fee, and probably on top of the other adjustment will be needed just to keep the existing level of services there.
The fire fund covers operating and capital.
It's primarily operating. Yeah. Capital budget, we mentioned earlier that it's primarily rely on our GO bond, and once you issue bond, it's transferred to debt service burden in the operating budget there. So currently, we are looking at in general, probably $90 to $95 million GO bond authorization, but the demand side is usually more than doubling that. If you look at the county's multi-year CIP plan, those out years usually reflect requests rather than truly what's affordable level. Those requests are between $196 million to $236 million. So it's more than twice of the potential available resources on that. And those demands from everybody, that's for education and the for roads, transportation, for senior centers, public safety stations, and all kinds of needs there. So that is actually a very significant gap there, as you can tell them. And every year we struggle and try to balance the needs. And also, by the way, besides building new ones, we also have to make sure we maintain the relevant existing ones. Those actually a big burden too. So we're going to have a chance to talk more later. Just want to let you know that these are some of the challenges we're facing currently. Some of the issues we talk about was already touched upon in last year's Spending Affordability Committee report, and actually it's in line with some of the warnings of the report last year. As I mentioned earlier, the committee was very right to point it out there. The county has some significant challenges, and the slowed down of revenue growth is not going to keep up with the needs there. And also, they actually pointed out there, these challenges will maintain and grow more severe in the next decade. Actually, as of today, I see the picture kind of worse from last year. So I think they're very right in terms of the general direction, and also in terms of the way that we should take things in a prudent way, understanding all the uncertainties there. So what are we going to do besides asking for the group's help on that in the next 1.5 months there is we're talking about these internally with the leadership in the county side. There is, we do have to acknowledge the fiscal reality, and we all have to look at different options on the table and balance the needs on that, understanding there all the solution has consequences there. We have to balance those. We also need to get pre-planned for as much as possible for a potential economic downturn, understanding if we don't do anything, once it hits, then we have little flexibility, then we may not have a choice, but have to have very severe service cuts or very significant tax increase. Neither of this is desirable, so we should do as much as possible to plan ahead and to try to hedge as much as possible to avoid draconian actions one way or another, which is going to have impact to our citizens. We also have to transfer ways of doing business. I mean, in private sector, that happened a lot. In government, we need to do that as well continuously, which is saying that we have to boost more efficiency more and look at the data and find a more innovative approach there. For example, we're exploring more energy-saving ideas here. Most of the county buildings already use LED lights here, but there are some other places we heard that they are possible to implement it as well, and there are other energy savings ideas. Some of those need a little bit upfront investment, but on an ongoing basis should provide savings there. We should also use more technology as solutions, and we're also working with our fleet department and looking at the opportunity of some shared vehicles internally, shared equipment internally to help maximize utility and lower the needs for equipment there. So different things has to be explored, but it's important to look at that hard and to find as much as possible the efficiency gain. And also we have to look at the permanent solutions there. Anything one time, sometimes we have to use that strategy, but that's not going to solve the problem from the fundamental, because it's not a one-year problem. Besides recession, there's a structural imbalance as we see earlier. Even before recession, there's a structural problem. So we have to find the ways to fundamentally make the revenue expenditure a little bit closer, and we have to look at that closely. So the county agencies there, we already directed them to start to provide options. So in other words, we asked them to provide not only the same service scenario budget requests, but also 2% reduction options. This gives us some ideas to look at. We also asked them to look at not only fiscal year 20, but also provide a 6-year projection as well, your 6-year savings opportunities there. And what does that mean to your services? And also, is there any innovative savings ideas? So in the next several weeks, we're going to work closely with the department and try to find out those, maybe I shouldn't call it low-hanging fruit, but anything that we can potentially implement during FY20 and generate some savings, and we need to look at that. So on the CIP plans, also we have to collaboratively work with different stakeholders there, try to look at a more affordable multi-year plan to make all those future years plan in a book that's doubling what available resources really not meaningful, and to make people kind of looking into that as guidance is going to be misguided there. So I think it needs a lot of collective efforts to try to make the future years plan a true plan rather than just doubling the real plan. So that's something needs a lot of work and needs a lot of decision making there. We also have to work closely to try to boost commercial base in particular to make sure we have some way to drive our revenues there. And last but not least, we have to communicate and engage all the stakeholders and continue that conversation and find a ways to make it work and manage expectations there. So recently we heard from the school superintendent about a budget request to the county about the county funding, and it was including about $123 million increase in county funding. So that level of increase is actually 9 times of the county total general fund revenue growth in fiscal 2018. And just for illustration purpose there, if we try to meet that request there, looking tax ideas, then that's basically ask an average household in Howard County to increase tax payment by more than $1,000 a year for your real property tax. And for the business owners, on average, to increase your personal property tax by about 1/4, because these tax rates usually locked together from that there. That's obviously very significant. Or alternatively, if you don't look at tax options there, then that's basically equivalent of eliminating our police department entirely, plus a couple small agencies there. So these just for illustrations. Purpose to let you know that the challenge that we're facing in terms of the reality, fiscal reality versus what's the desire or the needs reflected by different entities there. So really we have a lot of work to do, and we have to work together to find solutions there. So going back to the concept of budgeting, the nature of budget is really a plan to allocate scarce resources based on project revenue. I have an underline there because you never have enough, even in good years. But if it's a moderate growth or even economic downturn, that gap is going to be even bigger. So what we have to do, based on my own experience, is you really cannot count scenario 1, which is money falling down from the sky. You have to look at the true scenario is these are taxpayers' dollars. And they are a limits to that there. We have to do our best to make the best use of it and do our best to answer all those needs there. At least we will do our best collectively to to support all the key services there, but at the same time, keep in mind the tax burden as well on that. So obviously, big challenge there. We're going to talk more in the next several weeks on that. Collectively, we'll always find solutions there to do our best to base limited resources there. A quick summary about overall fiscal condition. I think we should talk a little bit about strengths as well. So far, talk about the challenge we're looking at there. The strengths, our finance director is going to talk a little bit more in details. We are very proud. We are AAA rated for our bonds, geo bond there by all 3 credit rating agencies. People talk about that, but you may not know how unique that is. It's only 43 counties out of 3,000. Really, we are top 1% in the nation for doing it. Extremely difficult to get there, and it's difficult to keep it. It's actually not only reflect recognition about debt, it's also recognition of all kinds of different economic factors about financial management, ability, about long-term liability management, about the county's future in terms of not only people have confidence in you not only today, but also believe 20 years from now you have the ability and you are going to pay your debt on that. So that's a really important indicator overall. And we already talked about some of the weakness and also the threats there. But one thing I want to emphasize again is anytime the threats or the challenges can also give the opportunities for thinking things differently, to taking different approach on that there. And that's something we got to do, and we have to do that together. So with that, I'll invite Janet Urban, our finance director, to talk about that. Multitasking.
So good morning, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So Holly is a really hard act to follow. She has amazing things to say all the time. Maybe not the happiest things, but amazing things to say. Her comments kind of lead into what I wanted to talk about today. All of the factors that she was mentioning do influence our county's long-term debt planning and our debt service. So these factors up here, AAA and stable. This represents the financial community's outlook of Howard County. We are rated the very highest there is, AAA, and that's sort of like our credit score. You all have a credit score and your ability to pay back your debts, and that's the county's credit score. So what stable indicates is that the outlook is pretty good, that within the next 6 months to 2 years, it is not likely to change. That rating is not likely to change. So that's pretty good too. So in English class, we all learn when you're explaining something, you want to talk about the who, what, why, when, and how. So for the who, municipal governments seek out this rating for their debt service to finance long-term capital needs with multi-year debt programs. Like Holly said, 43 out of 3,100 counties across the U.S. hold this distinction. Here in Maryland, there are 9 of 23 counties, so we're a little bit more concentrated here, but overall, it's very rare. We have held this AAA distinction now for 22 years, and this year we're hoping to make it 23 years. Okay, so then what are we talking about? The debt instrument ratings. AAA is the highest, and C or D would be a junk bond. It defines our credit quality of the instrument that we are selling in the marketplace. And it represents the financial strength of our entity and our ability to pay back our principal and interest payments in a timely fashion. So why? Why do we seek this rating? So from the debt issuer's perspective, a higher rating enhances the marketability of our bonds. It allows reduced interest costs over the life of the borrowing. Currently, the difference between a AAA and a AA in today's market conditions is $700,000 interest on a $100 million issuance. So that's just one rating off. It allows for better overall terms and conditions for our bond sale, greater access to capital markets during periods of market disruption. It allows, this is for Larry, increased ability to secure economic development opportunities. And of course, there's always the bragging rights. You can't definitely disagree on the bragging rights. From the rating agent, from the market's perspective, it allows for faster evaluation of risk. So people can just look at us and know that we're going to be a good investment. When? So we get our ratings for each issuance. Typically, annually, we do our GO bond sale for our capital program. And in the interim, we carry a short-term borrowing instrument, sometimes with like a bank loan, or we'll sell bond anticipation notes. I think most recently it's been the bank loan route that we've taken. And our AAA allows us to get a lower interest rate on that bank loan borrowing as well, get a more favorable outlook from the bank. So annually, once our financial statements are complete for the prior fiscal year, and we have some spending and revenue collection patterns that are established, and some projections for how that's going to finish out in the current year. Holly works on those. The economic forecasts for the next budget year are a little bit clearer. We're starting to see that now. The debt manager will begin the process of planning the presentation and the actual sale, which typically on our annual GO bonds takes place in the spring. And then how do we get these ratings? We do a comprehensive credit presentation to all three rating agencies. And I'll talk about that on another slide, what they're looking for there. So important to note is that they monitor the financial condition and track the underlying credit characteristics until its maturity. So we may sell a bond this year, but if it's a 20-year bond, they're looking every year for 20 years at what's going on in the county. And we file reports annually on the fiscal condition, and they are viewed. And a change in a rating can impact the bonds in the secondary market, so that's important as well. And it's interesting to note that after the flood in 2018, the rating agencies were on the phone to us, of course, expressing their sympathy for what actually happened, but also asking, what's our plan? They wanted to know what's our plan. So we had put together a presentation and we gave it to all three agencies within about the first 2 weeks or so, I think, after the flood, of how we were going to manage the crisis, as much financially as, structurally and everything else. So here's a really busy slide. It was cut off at the bottom. But these are the kinds of things that the rating agency is looking at. And Holly has touched on a number of these. That factor one, the economy and the tax base, is about 30% weighted. This is looking at the sources of revenue and the strength of the tax base, which is the number of residents, and the resilience of the tax base. Factor two is the finances. So it illustrates the net financial resources available in the short term. It measures trends. And what it really asks, are the reserves and liquidity increasing in step with the budgetary growth? So they're doing all their machinations, and that's also 30%. Management is about 20% of what they are evaluating, and it's our legal ability to match revenues and expenses. Does our charter, do our policies support what we need to do with our revenue and expenses? So the 5-year history, interestingly enough on that one, the 5-year history measures the practical ability and willingness to do that matching. So, as Holly was talking, and the job that the committee has to do here today, or over the next several weeks, falls right into this evaluation step. And then factor 4 is debt and pensions. So it's measuring the magnitude of the debt obligations relative to the resources, using both tax and operations. So they're very busy doing a lot of calculations and looking to give us a fair score so that the buyers and the market can have the most up-to-date information. So the county has a debt policy, and our debt policy requires us to do these debt measures, and this will actually be done in session 5. Nikki Griffith, debt manager, will get up and give the most current actuals and projections during our fifth session. So I thought I would include some general comments from the rating agencies on just the counties in the Maryland area from last fall. So what they said was we had limited volatility through the last recession because we have that economic hub. Private sector development was increased, and our phased property tax assessments. Holly noted the kind of danger about the phased property tax assessments. It's a good thing until it's not. And then we have limited property tax volatility through the recession because we can have the ability to adjust our rates. And then lastly, these are some comments from when we went to the market last year from the rating agencies. So we AAA, stable long-term rating, and our credit profile on our GEO program as a whole. The AAA and the stable was affirmed, so on all our past debt. So pretty favorable comments until we get down to the stable outlook reflects the likelihood that our fiscal position will remain sound given our adherence to fiscal policy. Any deviation from these projections for additional declines and reserves to result in a negative trading credit. But for the most part, an overall positive outlook for the county, and one of the big reasons is because of what we're doing here in the next several weeks. We're paying attention, we know what our numbers are, we're trying to be realistic and eventually coming together and working on this.
Thank you. Great. A lot to digest. Thank you. So we only have just several minutes after, so I don't know whether anybody has questions here, or we can ask after the formal session. Okay, so then I'll just talk about next session. Next session is Wednesday next week, start at 7 o'clock. That's going to be four entities going to talk to there will be our school system, community college and library, and also police department. So we look forward to that. And thanks everybody for coming, and we really look forward to working closely with everybody. And also, just for your information, all those sessions we will videotape, and we're also going to post online. So if by any chance somebody missed one or want to revisit what was discussed earlier or presented earlier, you have opportunity to look at it online. And also anytime after this, feel free to contact me or my staff if you want to discuss more on any of the discussions. So with that, I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much for coming.